In today's video, we are going to be talking about the RF Canon 70-200 f2.8 and see, is it worth the extra price tag for filming and video work compared to its EF counterpart? What's going on, everybody? James Jackson here, back again with another video. If you're new to my channel, I do tips, tricks, news, and reviews for the film and video making industry. So if you do love the content here, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell so you can stay up to date on all the content going forth. All right, so today I got probably the final zoom lens of the holy trinity of the RF mounts that I've got a chance to try out. Today we are talking about this guy right here, the Canon 70-200 F2.8 IS RF lens. This has been the talk about for a lot of people, especially in the photography world, and we've heard a lot of great things about it. I was really curious coming from a video perspective in terms of how this lens compares to its old EF counterpart, which is a lens that I constantly use all the time for filming weddings and corporate videos, because I've always used one of my fellow filmmakers 70-200s, or I have rented the 70-200 out myself. So I was really curious, because one of the things that has been brought up a lot of times is that I've noticed on the 70-200 that especially when it comes to weddings, it tends to sometimes have some issues with the Canon C70 in terms of maintaining autofocus. So I was really curious to see if there would be any improvements on the autofocus with the 70-200 RF, since it is designed specifically for the RF mounts like this was on the C70. And I had some interesting results. So definitely tune in to see about that. But first, I want to discuss one of the biggest compliments of this lens, and that is the size and the weight. Now, everybody talks about the size all the time. As you can see here, it's pretty much like super compact, and it really keeps everything together, so it's easy to put in something like a backpack. But what is even more loving about this lens than the size is the weight. As someone who always would carry around the 70-200, it always felt extremely heavy and made cameras like the C70 very front-sided, and sometimes, like, without really serious rod supports, it would also bend them out, which also gave way to some issues with autofocus. Whereas this is a fraction of the weights. Like, as soon as I picked this up, I'm like, holy crap, this thing is way lighter. I will say it is definitely, I would say it's about the weight of a 24-70 f2.8, maybe a little bit heavier, but around the 24-72. The weight is about the same there. But that's one of the things I absolutely love about it in terms of just from a Ergos standpoint. It's lighter, it's more compact, and you can basically compress it into like smaller packs so you could travel with this easier. But let's talk about the optics, and the image out of it is wonderful. It's stellar, just like everybody has talked about it. I do love the fact that it works so well. In terms of autofocus performances, I did notice a slight improvement on my behalf. I have tried to talk to one of my friends about it. They see a little bit of improvements, but overall, I don't know if it's the autofocus, at least in terms of the C70. The R5 is a completely different story, but in terms of somebody who's maybe owns a C70 that may wants to use a telephoto zoom lens, I don't know if this is actually going to be, if that's your driving force is to improve the autofocus by going with the RF. I don't know if that's going to be enough, because I didn't see that much of an improvement in terms of autofocus performance from the old 70-200 to this one. The other thing that kind of throws me off about this lens in particular, because I'm so used to the focal zoom being here on the ODF. Instead, now the focal zoom is always here. So I constantly find myself throwing the focus, which I'm not trying to do, compared to throwing the zoom. I kind of wish they flipped this, where the zoom was back here like it normally is, and then the focus point is here. I kind of get it. Again, this is designed to work more with smaller DSLRs, so it makes sense that this is the focal zoom ring would be here. But for someone who mainly has been using this with autofocus, having the zoom ring up front just throws it off. But this is something that you may want to really just be on the lookout for. And I'll say this, in terms of balancing, again, back to the weight with the EOS C70, this lens feels way more, it feels way more natural to go with this camera. I honestly feel like I don't even need this, you don't even need this thing here. The weight is just so comparable, and actually it would probably help you if you just took this off. I don't see the reason for this because it is really that light. And I totally can see myself going handheld with this lens, which is something that I was not necessarily always a fan of doing. I've done it a couple times with the EF version, but going handheld with this has actually been quite a bit of fun. Now, let me just be very, very clear. I've only used this on one particular job. I've only used it on one wedding. So it's only very limited town time compared to what other people. And also I'm looking at it from a cinema video oriented perspective, not necessarily the photography perspective. So all those factors and just keep those miles in play. But I'm not just going to sit here and just talk about it. I'm going to put the optics on while we go over some final details. I'm going to put this on the EOS R5, and I'll be switching between that and the lens that I'm shooting on right now, which is the 28 to 70 f2. Hopefully you guys have noticed the difference with the setup and how things look compared to previously. But let's just put this on. I'm gonna put this on the EOS R5 so you guys can see how this works. Maybe if you're looking at this possibly in a multi-cam studio. So here we go. Hey guys, I'm back. So once again, we are on the 28 to 70 f2, which this is slowly becoming, I'm sorry, not slowly, it's rapidly becoming my favorite lens, which I will talk about in another video. But we're once again still on the 70 to 200 RF lens. And this is on the EOS R5, which you guys can see right here. So this is a full frame steady, full 70 mil, and this is on the 28 mil. So you guys can pretty much see what it would look like to sort of match the different cameras, the different looks, and see how this is. You guys can take a look at it. Overall, again, I think so here's my overall thoughts, some things, as you guys can look at the image quality of the 70 to 200. And as I cut back between both of these cameras, you will get the chance to see basically what my thoughts are in terms of image quality. So in terms of image quality, I do notice that there is a definite increase of color depth. I like the color rendering out of the RF a little bit better than the EF version. There is there is a bit more detail, but honestly, there's not that much. And then again, the big thing that I have discussed already was the autofocus. On the R5, it is great. It finds, like, again, with that amazing eye tracking, which is looking at me right now, it's able to find the eye really easy without any issues. Even the underlit side, which is right here, compared to the C70. But the C70 is pretty much my main working horse, especially for weddings. And I do notice that when it starts going into shadow portions, or when there's multiple bodies that just start crossing into different parts, that's when the autofocus tends to struggle, even with the 70 to 200 right here. However, my point, I do feel that in terms of certain scenarios like bodies crossing each other, that tends to just be what a lot of autofocus that struggles with. What I do like about the C70 is that once you have your subject lock on, you can just simply tap on the screen. Even when you don't have the whole area autofocus engaged, you could just simply tap the screen. As long as the face detection autofocus is engaged, you could tap the screen and it will automatically start tracking that subject if you tap on the box, which does help. But as soon as that disappears or somebody walks into the foreground, it sort of loses it. So that's one of the things that I'm just being honest. that continues to struggle. However, that's with the 70 to 200 lens. I saw less of that issue with the 28 to 70. Like the 28 to 70, I found that as long as that if you locked on it, it held way better than the 70 to 200. Which is why I wanted to bring in the 28 to 70, because there was this point in the reception of the wedding I did where this girl was doing a dance, a praise dance, and she's going like crazy rapidly all across the room, and essentially the 28 to 70, which is the one I decided to go on, it locked onto her and basically followed her the entire way. It was a great thing. So that's why I want to say this is not necessarily, I'm not sure if this is necessarily something with the C70 or it's just that the lenses selection. But let's get back to the 70 to 200, which is what you guys are here about. And I will say this, if you guys are someone who's more on the hybrid cameras, the mirrorless cameras, so something like the R5, the newly announced R3, or maybe you're on the R6 or the older R and RP, the 70 to 200 is great for you guys, especially if you do mixed photography and video. I think the 70 to 200 RF version is well worth its value, just purely on the weight and the size, but mainly the weight. The weight difference between this and the old one is such a huge difference. I cannot stress this enough. That alone to me is worth its value. So if you are somebody that's more on the hybrid side of video, and you're wondering between the EF and the RF version, I would definitely say go with the RF version. However, back to everybody who may be looking at cameras, maybe you own the Canon Cinema EOS C70, and basically between the performance, just purely on the performance of the lenses, while I do like the weight, and the weight is definitely better, I personally feel there's still maybe a bit more benefit on the EF versions for the C70. Number one, you can add the focal reducer, which all of a sudden gives you the full frame perspective, and you get an additional stop of light on the older EF version. So even though you're going to have to deal with the weight may be almost worth it for the additional stop of light, which if you're filming weddings or any sort of event where you don't have control over your entire lighting setting, that's way more valuable. And it also will help you with your autofocus performance because you're getting that additional stop of light. So that to me is another big deal, and why I say in terms of the price difference, which is like what, which is well over $1,000 more. Personally, if you're doing purely video, especially if you're somebody that is working in the C70, I personally feel the C70 is, with the EF version, is worth it. I think that is a better option for over, say, something like the hybrid mirrorless cameras. But this is my thoughts. I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think of this. Leave your comments below. And also, once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button so we can combat these YouTube algorithms and get this review out to other people so they can see and maybe they can help them with decisions. And until next time, take care, everyone.